Hello, and welcome to the Crowley ISD PLC Curriculum Preview for ELA 8th Grade, Unit 1. I'm Sharon Graves, Secondary ELAR Curriculum Coordinator. I look forward to working with teachers and instructional leaders throughout the school year. Please feel free to communicate with me anytime for questions or additional support. Please look at your local assessment 8th grade blueprint for Unit 1, Analyzing Fiction and Drama. Please pause for a moment to review the Unit 1 blueprint. 20 instructional days are utilized for Unit 1. The district has allowed for 3 days at the beginning of the school year for beginning of the year procedures. Of the 20 instructional days, they will begin from August 28th through September 27th. The Unit 1 local assessment will be available for printing purposes on September 26th, and the unit should be assessed on September 28th. Per the local assessment guidelines, teachers are to administer unit assessments within 3 school days upon completion of their unit. For today's lesson, I will identify curriculum hotspots and provide comprehension instructional strategies that include close reading using the notice and note strategies, anchor questions, and the fundamental 5 strategies. I will lead you through an analysis of the cognitive complexity, content, and context of the readiness standard. I will provide seed questions for your PLC to focus on learning, and I will complete the content builder and the PLC for the reading PLC for readiness standard 8.6a. You will analyze the readiness standard in the IFD to gain a deeper understanding of how to use the standard to focus on student learning. Materials you will need for the PLC is your instructional focus document, Unit 1, your organizing instruction using the TEAC standard types, and the PLC for reading PLC. For the first 6 weeks, the curriculum preview will target Readiness Standard 8.6a, Analyze Linear Plot Development, to determine whether and how conflicts are resolved. Based on the heat map displayed, please pause and discuss what conclusions can be drawn about 8.6a. Look at question 6. It's from the 2014 STAR assessment that assesses 8.6a. What level of specificity is this question? Please pause the video to discuss this question and answer its alignment to the specificity of the standard. This is also one of 3 questions which were assessed in 2014. Now that we have identified our hotspots for Unit 1 as 8.6a, let's focus on learning by first studying these TEACs and then discussing the 4 essential questions. Please locate 8.6a on your IFD. Pause the video to allow for everyone to turn to their IFD. You will want to take notes for the next portion of the video. The 4 essential questions are: what do we expect our students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? How will we respond when students don't learn? And how will we enrich those students who do learn? To set a purpose for reading when we study a standard or a bundle of standards, we read with this question in mind: what do we want our students to learn? To focus on learning, start by studying the standard to answer the first essential question. At this time, please pause the video to locate your Unit 1 in the IFD. Turn to page 23 to find your Knowledge and Skills Statement, 8.6. Let's review the unit levels of specificity. There are 3 components to each TEAC and SE: the cognitive, the content, and the context. For 8.6, students are asked to understand, make inferences, and draw conclusions. Notice the cognitive level of blooms in which students are asked to think. How do the different levels of rigor necessitate in-depth instruction? The structure and elements of fiction are the content, the what that students are learning. The context is the how in which students practice and show their learning. Figure 19D and E may also be assessed as a readiness or supporting standard with 8.6. Now let's focus specifically on the hotspot, 8.6a. It's part of Category 2, Understanding Analysis of Literary Text. Please take a moment to pause the video to look on page 24 and 25 and review the standard and unit level specificity. What is the verb and the cognitive level of Bloom's? What is the content, the what, that students are learning? What is the context, the how, in which students are practicing and showing their learning? Did you notice the Bloom's level of the verb analyze? The content is the linear plot development, and the context is the conflict and whether and how conflicts are resolved in fiction and drama. Let's focus on learning. What do we want our students to learn? According to the standards, how will we make it relevant and rigorous for them? Take a moment to write the learning statement out. Then collaborate about how you can make the learning relevant and rigorous for students. How will we know the students have learned? This is what we look for every day in our instruction, the knowing. Do students know and can they demonstrate their learning? As we use the content builder, let's build our plan for learning with this question in mind. This diagram helps illustrate that when planning for instruction, it is vital that concepts be taught in connection with the process standards. Students use processes to acquire and demonstrate understanding. The tools to know process standards act as a stimulus for students by providing strategies and structures students use to access their learning. In the 7th and 8th grade ELAR levels, Figure 19D is the tools to know, Figure 19E is the ways to show, and provide an opportunity for students to demonstrate understanding and communicate an application of their learning. Still looking at Unit 1 on page 24 and 25 in your IFD, TEK 8.6a, please take a moment to review the placement of each TEK. Notice there are 2 readiness standards, but we will only focus on 8.6a today. There is one supporting standard that is foundational for learning. To understand the rationale of the Figure 19 process standards I chose, take a look at the highly tested Figure 19 standards for grades K through 12. The highly tested Figure 19 process standards are the ways students show their learning through Figure 19A, D, E, and F. Let's revisit question 2. During and after building a plan using what we know about the process standards, we want to compose a response to this question. How will we know students learned? How will we gauge if students know and can demonstrate their learning to the depth and complexity of the standard? Please pause the video at this time and write a response to this question. Remember that the supporting standards are the scaffolds of learning. They are the prerequisite skills that students may need to begin learning the standard. If students aren't successful at learning the large concepts, or you know they have gaps that need to be attended to, start with what they should already know, and if needed, begin interventions with the standards. Discuss the following questions and what they may look like on your campus. How will we provide students with additional time and support in a timely, directive, and systematic way when students experience difficulty? Please pause the video at this time to allow for your team discussion. The fourth essential question to focus on learning is how do we enrich those who do learn? This question addresses the need to enrich students who are learning and take their thinking and learning to a higher level. As a collaborative team, it's important to begin by aligning your understanding of the standard, the verb, the skill, and the context in the knowledge and skill statements and the student expectation. The team should agree on what students must be able to do to demonstrate mastery of the highest leverage skill. Align your understanding of the prerequisite skill to know where your instruction should begin. You should check for understanding through individual formative assessment frequently to drive future instruction. Collect and review your data to make instructional decisions about your students and your instruction. And your team should assess its data to make adjustments to its instructional plan. For this video, I will model for you how to use the PLC for Reading PLC tool. In the upcoming videos, I will use the gradual release model so that your PLC teams can complete this task independently. Looking at TEK 8.6a in fiction, short story is the text I chose to model the instructional strategy. The levels of thinking from the content builder are to establish a purpose for reading, use background knowledge, summarize, make inferences, and ask interpretive, evaluative, and universal questions of the text. The evidence of learning will be in student writing via the Notice and Note graphic organizer and by listening to student discussions. The instructional strategy for learning to teach students how to make inferences about text are close reading and cooperative learning structures. Although the Notice and Note strategies can be used with short stories, literary nonfiction, and poetry, the most commonly taught novels in grades 4 through 8 contain the 6 common signposts of Notice and Note. The Notice and Note signposts are contrasts and contradictions, aha moments, again and again, tough questions, words of the wiser, and memory moment. Notice the sample charts with the text feature anchor question and literary elements that it supports. Again and again, tough questions, memory moments, contrasts and contradictions, aha moments, words of the wiser. Signposts emphasize the text feature that reveals the signpost and the questions that students should consider as they're reading. This is your text-dependent question. Students make inferences about the text and use evidence. The signpost represents what we want students to do as they read. They notice the clues to the signpost, and the anchor questions are the literary element it helps them understand. As you teach each signpost, create an anchor chart like the ones here for your classroom wall. These anchor charts will serve as a great anchor lesson and remind students to always notice and note. You should decide upon an order for teaching the Notice and Note signpost. Set aside time to teach each signpost, or some can be taught together. Teach each signpost lesson with a text that illustrates the targeted signpost. Use a gradual release model and think about the generalizable language that you will use which students can carry with them from the next text that they read. The gradual release model works well with this close reading strategy. You will demonstrate then, over time, the part of the task to the class. Have them collaborate, and then they will do it on their own. Explain the signpost and the anchor question, teacher modeling. Tell students you'll show them how the signpost you're teaching works by sharing a short text. Read aloud to the first occurrence of the signpost that you are teaching. Point out that what you saw in the text that caused you to pause is the signpost you're teaching, and remind students that authors use signposts to give readers information. This is the generalizable language. Do not exclude this. Ask yourself the anchor question and share your thoughts about possible answers. This is where you're making inferences about the text. On to guided instruction, you will read the second section, stop at the next instance of the signpost. For guided practice, read the third section and perhaps the fourth. Read to the end of the selection. Then tell students to watch for the feature in their independent reading, to mark those they find and write down their thoughts as they think about and reflect on the anchor question. This is the final independent practice. Please use the gradual release of responsibility link for the Notice and Note lessons framework for more information. The rationale and benefits for using the close reading strategy of notice and note. It gives students the scaffolding that they need to read more closely and develop those lifelong learning habits. The signpost creates skilled, observant, engaged, independent readers. It alerts students to what's happening next in the text, encourages them to naturally use text evidence, encourages them to pay attention to specifics, and encourages students to inference. Each signpost has several graphic organizers students can use to show their evidence of learning. This is an example graphic organizer of contrasts and contradictions. It serves as both a scaffold for learning and a demonstration of learning because it has the text clues students look for to identify the signpost, as well as the anchor question to stimulate their thinking. Here is an example of student discussions during the reading of Tuesday of Another June. Students noticed the contrast and contradiction of June's close relationship with her mother, but June fails to tell her that she is being physically and emotionally abused by another girl named June. Every Tuesday at swim practice. Listen to the students' thinking processes as they respond to the question, why is the character doing that?
I'm feeling that our June is very sad. She's angry. She wants to do something about the way she's being treated.
But I'm wondering, why is she telling her mom? What do you think? What are you noticing?
I'm questioning why she hasn't stood up to the other June.
Okay, your mom?
I think she is not telling her mother because she doesn't want her mother to worry since she comes from work tired and she's always busy, so she doesn't want to go on her mother.
Later, students reflected and wrote about the most important signposts in this short story, answering each of the anchor questions and formulating the theme statements for the text. The next day, students used their entries to begin writing a literary response to this selection, complete with thesis statement, textual evidence, and the life lesson learned. Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes is another short story to easily teach students contrast and contradiction and other signposts. Please also utilize the links provided for more specific notice and note resources. I appreciate your participation in the PLC curriculum preview. When you plan to implement notice and note close reading strategies, please invite me in, as I would love to see classroom implementation, or if you would like for me to come and do a model lesson. If you have suggestions for future curriculum previews, please submit your ideas to my email on the screen. Also, I would like to hear from you if you have an instructional strategy that you would like to showcase in upcoming videos. Finally, please be sure to submit a copy of the PLC for Reading PLC document to the appropriate campus designee.